Hello, everyone. Welcome to World Backup Day. Yep, it's a thing, World Backup Day. So, happy World Backup Day celebrations to you. I don't even think I didn't see any cards. I don't think it's a Hallmark celebration, but um, I joke, but if you've ever had to pull data from a backup to kind of save the bacon, the moment I said celebrate your backups, you probably already popped the cork. You're probably already sucking one back. Because yeah, it's a big deal. Like it really it saves the day. You should wear a cape. But I was thinking about while I was doing preparing for this video, and it's like I've been preaching backups for 20 some odd years. I'm gonna start to date myself. 20 some odd years I've been talking about the importance of backups in your small businesses. And one of the things that kind of struck me odd was that I'm still preaching backups today and very much the way I did then, but for very different purposes. So back then we would flip tape drives and if you were fancy, you had hard drives that you would flip and you'd use or the tandem cartridges. You would take those and you would stick them off and hopefully they made it out of your glove compartment and made it into the house before the heat destroyed all the data on them. Um, and that was the way we did it. We just figured out what we had to back up on the server and we backed it up. And if stuff happened, servers crashed. And when they crashed back then, sometimes they take all the data out. A lot of times they would take all the data out depending on what failed. So we would have these backups to get us up and running again. It was their purpose. So let's fast forward maybe almost a quarter of a century, and let's talk about what's changed. Well, I was going to say we don't use tapes anymore, but funny enough, tapes are kind of coming back. Um, and I'll talk really quickly about that. So when you have a tape, when we were swapping all these things out, we have this concept called air gap, which means there is air between the system that was being backed up and the actual media on which we put the backup on. So we had this air gap. Turns out some quarter century later, air gap's really convenient when you've got bad guys after you trying to get your data so they can't get to that data. So it's a really strong concept. And although these days we don't necessarily truly air gap, meaning that we don't have this physical piece of media that we're hanging on to, we do have a philosophy of air gap where you don't want compromised system to have any type of access to your backup system. So, but I thought that was just a funny aside how, we're kind of going back to using some of this old technology. But aside from that, I was really thinking about, well, I feel like something's fundamentally changed. And it has. And that is, we use a lot of cloud applications now. All your world was on your server 20 some odd years ago. Now your data is everywhere. You have QuickBooks Online, you have Office 365 with SharePoint and Teams, you've got Dropbox, you've got Google Suite, you've got all these places where pieces of your business live. And if you use a line of business app or a CRM system in the cloud or marketing systems in the cloud and all these pieces are all over the place, how do you know where your data is? I think this should be called worldwide where the heck is my data awareness day. It would make more sense. But really there's a process that you go through to discover this. And we do this on the security side, which why would we do that for security? Because it makes sense. One of the first things that threat actors do, if they can get a foothold in the system to determine what their impact can be to a system, is to establish what's called a data flow. So in every system, in every business, you got stuff that comes in, there's some process that happens and stuff that goes out all the time. And that's your data flow. And they want to kind of figure out where they can interrupt and leverage, because not always is it through ransom. If they can leverage a client or they can leverage a vendor into doing something stupid, they can make more money and it's easier for them. So they look at all of this data flow stuff. Well, data flow, we do it a little bit later in the process. First thing we look at is where's all the data that the company has, like where is it located? Is it in the cloud? Is it in a server? Is it in a process? Where does that data live? And then we go ahead and we classify that data. And then after we classify it, then we move on to the whole workflow. Like, how is this data? How does it move? Where does it need to be protected? Where does it need to be backed up? Very important pieces. So, and that's why my thought process jumped to, wow, it's much more complicated version of what we used to deal with, because we're not dealing with a single backup anymore. We're dealing with backups all over the universe of where your data lives. Now, that comes to another conversation that a lot of people are surprised when we have that. When I say people, I mean prospects and clients. They're kind of surprised to hear that your cloud provider that's hosting these great services for you, if you look at your service level agreement, most of them don't have a clause in there that says that they're responsible for your data. In fact, the clause usually says you're responsible for your data. You're like, that's crazy. I don't own their systems. Correct. You don't own their systems, but you do have ownership of the data because it's your data. So you need to make sure that you take care of it the best that you can in your own capacity, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're always responsible for your data. So what does this mean? Well, let's take Microsoft as an example. If you have Office 365, you have email, you have Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, all your data is sitting in there. Something happens. Can you call up Microsoft and get them to restore from a backup? Well, maybe. That I hear anecdotally that yes, as a last-ditch effort, that has worked out. But you're at their schedule, you're at how they ran backups, and it may not work out well for you and your business process. Matter of fact, if you look at the Microsoft service level agreement, they recommend that you do some sort of backup yourself that matches your business need, which makes sense, right? Microsoft can't be everything to everyone. It's not the way it works. So people are surprised when I say, no, we have to run backup on your Office 365. And then the next question inevitably is, well, aren't they responsible? It's like, well, that's for lawyers to decide. But I'm telling you right now that they've already limited their liability a lot by saying you need to have your own backup and you're in charge of your stuff. Now, what can happen out there? Why would we need to have this backup? Because it's rare that data disappears. It does happen. I've read cases of things getting moved in the back end and something happening, data loss ensues, and usually Microsoft's usually able to pull things together eventually. But we think of more nefarious things like a threat actor getting into your emails and encrypting everything. It can be done. These are files, there are permissions, APIs, all that we need are proper permissions to get in and alter files, and it can be done. So it's a real threat. It's a real thing. And that's why we need to have backup on everything that's important to our business. If it's not important to our business, then I have to ask another question. Why are we holding on to it? But if it's not important to our business, then we don't need to back it up. But unless it's some intermediate step in the data flow process, I'd have to ask why you have it in the first place, especially if there's risk around it. But that leads into a whole other security discussion. We're celebrating backups today, dang it, and let's keep it happy. Celebrating backups, I'm still going to call it Where the Heck is Your Data Located Awareness Day, because I like that one better. But so let's celebrate it. Let's celebrate having good backups. Let's celebrate having the security of having good air-gapped backups that the bad guys can't mess with if your systems happen to be compromised. Let's celebrate that, because it is the thing after the insurance companies do their stuff and the forensics teams do their stuff. It is solely the thing that will get everything back up and running in a reasonable manner in the way that it was intended. Wear the cape and save the day. So yes, with all of that, happy World Backup Day. Stay backed up, stay safe. We'll see you next time. Thanks.